everybody. My name is Dan. I'm from the Faculty of Arts at KPU. Thank you for the introduction, Janice. I stand here as an uninvited guest on the lands of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And I'm very honored to be supporting this panel for two incredibly moving and urgent and also beautiful films. And I don't want to take up any more of your time, because I'm sure you want to hear some more from the panelists. So I'm going to open this up immediately to questions from the audience. So if you have any questions for the panelists, please raise your hand and helpers will bring you microphones. And if you can wait until you have the microphone before you ask the question, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Farah. Thank you so much for those two tearful and beautiful and moving films. I wanted to ask Aaju if you could tell us what it would mean to be twice decolonized. What would that look like?
Thank you for that question. I had realized along trying to accomplish so much to compete in the white world, what the white society appreciated and valued, that I started questioning, where is this coming from? And the more I was learning about Inuit values from the elders and Inuit culture, I wish to incorporate those teachings in the modern context, because the values that I learned from the elders are coming from them living on the land with the teachings from generations and generations, but right now that's not possible. So we are trying to incorporate those values. I realized that in the process I had taken on a totally different perspective, and now I'm trying to decolonize, but I find myself still, it's like having a weight degree in something, and you're in that world. It's very interesting, because it's a new concept. We don't even have a terminology for that process in the Inuit language, because it's so foreign. Our terminology comes from tradition, from the land, from the environment. Whatever we see, the form or its utility, that's how we name it. But now it's a new process where what does colonization mean, and what is the process of decolonizing in today's world? It's a mess. It's like trying to clean up and you don't know where everything goes. It's a process. It's a very interesting process. Yeah. I'm not decolonized yet, but stay tuned for the next film. Twice decolonized.
Do any of the other two panelists have any perspectives on what it means to be decolonized? It's a question I think lots of people are grappling with, but what it means in practice is hard for some people to reckon with.
I mean, hello. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really difficult question, and I think you answered it beautifully from your perspective. To decolonize ourselves, I mean, we are the colonizers, so I think it means taking a really hard look at our history, and I think it means being honest about who we are. And I know that's really hard, but I think we have to start having these conversations with our children really early. I think raising good men is something I feel really passionate about. I have a 9-year-old son. And he is going to learn his Indigenous history. He's half Australian, half American, and so he is going to learn that colonized history twice. And he, that's something we work really hard at in our family. And I think It starts with ourselves. We have to take the responsibility ourselves. So, yeah, great question.
That is a really interesting question, because I think here, for each of us, because we don't know what that concept is, being colonized, and who's the colonizer, and today with multimedia and everything that is being bombarded to ourselves and our children, that is going to be difficult. But I think that it takes the two parties to figure out, okay, what is the Inuit state? What is the Inuit values that we would like to reintroduce in this modern context? It's going to take the two parties to figure out who is the whole person again. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are really great points that you both make as well. I think decolonization is a journey and a process for everyone, regardless of if we're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, and it's needed in all spaces and all capacities. We all have a role to play, and I think it really is important to not only speak to the history, but also how that history continues to impact the present and how it will continue to impact our future unless we take some really important steps today.
Thank you. More questions from the audience. I think there was a hand just down here at the front.
Really, thank you so much for both these films. And I have to say, I was with a popcorn, buttery popcorn tissue paper, and it's just, I've been just crying and sniffling. So thank you so much, because they were incredibly touching films. I wanted to know, because with the kind of organization I'm with, we try and do decolonization, and we give voice. We have something called the Indigenous Climate Initiatives Data Quilt, and we're trying to voice, bring forth what are the climate initiatives in different Indigenous communities in BC. And I was wondering, up in Nunavut, is something like that being done? Are there projects like that? Or is the school, are you having something like a blanket exercise so that more people are better informed about, what is, the culture and, things like that, and better education, I would say.
So your question is what?
Just, is there better education? I mean, is there a blanket exercise like we have, which talks about from contact what happened? So I'm just wondering, is there just in the schools, are they teaching anything about the culture?
So your question is, are they not about the climate, but are they
culture,
talking about
yeah.
Indigenous or Inuit tradition?
Inuit
There
tradition.
is some Inuit teaching and tradition. I work in a company where we're teaching adult Inuit their language and their culture. And there's something, it's not government, it's a private company, where the teaching is to take back the whole woman, for women and their roles and their traditions, and take back the whole man, where we teach all the skills, the language, and to make them feel whole again, because this whole colonial system, taking children away and loss of language and culture, did take a lot away from Inuit. So I applaud this company for taking back the tradition and taking back this heritage that was ours. A very good program. In the elementary and high schools, not so much, because we only have Inuit if the parents choose to teach their children in the Inuit language to grade 4, but then everything else is in English. Alberta curriculum. That needs to change, but we need to have the man and woman power to implement that. We need to change the system so that we recognize elders who have that whole vast knowledge and make it that they can teach in schools. We only hire them now and then, very minimal. That could be a lot more. Because we are still under the Alberta education system.
Hi. I have a comment and a question. The comment is, I'm European living in North America, and one challenge I see is that I think a lot of people in Europe and America, of all ages, I'm afraid they are not. I'm afraid they don't know what colonization is to begin with. So before working on decolonization, I think there's a lot of work to be done in reminding, explaining, or reframing for these people. First of all, they have to understand what was and is colonization. That's my comment. My question is that simply what is the status in the European Union for the creation of this permanent forum for Indigenous people? Thank you. Fantastic film.
Thank you for your comment. Well, it's hard to change a 500-year history. The Pope declared that all lands that are not occupied should be taken. And to take all our territories as Indigenous peoples, we were declared non-human or savages, or we were not digging into the ground, so therefore our land was taken. With the land claims agreement, we had to fight the Canadian government to reclaim a small part of our territory. So for Westerners who have taken and lived under that declaration, it's a long story. 500 years of you guys and our people to try to say that declaration was wrong. And the Pope, 500 years ago, was wrong declaring that we were non-human beings. Having said that, then let's just move forward and try to figure out how do we can't just kick you all guys out, right? You live in Canada now. Where are you going? This is our territory. We can't do that, so we have to be civil and kind. As far as the EU declaration, that I would like to have an EU forum for Indigenous people, we are still working on it. I met so many amazing people that I think that's the next chapter of where I should go. But governments and EU are not coming and saying, here are you, this is your space, you can have your EU forum, and we are going to stop harming Indigenous people and you can have a seat. That ain't going to happen. So we'll have to work on it. That's a lot of work for solo mio. If you have $10 billion, I'm here. I'll take it. It's a lot of work to put on me. It's a lot of education to undo all the harm that has been done. But I wasn't colonized for nothing. I can speak your language. You don't have to learn my language in order to move forward. We can work together. And you have to realize it's a lot put on our shoulders. So let's work together. And this film has been amazing to educate people and to move us in the right direction. I'll take your name after. Just kidding.
My comment is I just wanted to say thank you for the movie, for both performances, and especially because I appreciated you sharing your very personal life and details and your family with us. I was curious in terms of the presence of females at the tables that you sat at. Were men invited? Were they interested in being there? I appreciate the fact that I think women bring a different perspective. Just wanted your thoughts on that.
Thank you for that question. I find when Inuit were dislocated, I can't speak on other Indigenous groups. when Inuit were taken from their hunting camps and their leaders were the hunters. They were the men who would go out and provide the food. But then when Canadian government came in and the Danish government came in, there was a whole different structure. They just dislocated all the men and then put other elected people or Southerners to run society. And the men sort of didn't have a place in that system. But for women everywhere on earth right now and back then, we all have to get up every day and feed the kids. There's nothing more important than getting up and feed the kids. And it doesn't matter how you do it, you are just gonna have to get up, suck it up and live with it and feed the kids. So while the men were dislocated, the women still had to get up. And I think women tend to focus on society, on families, on getting on, feeding the children and standing up and saying, okay, this is wrong, we have to do something about this. I found in my trips all this time that there was always women who were doing all the advocating and all the fighting because nobody pays you to do that. The men go and get big jobs and they're in big businesses and they have all that money. Why should they care, right? Not saying that men don't care, but I find that it's women who will tend to be in those roles, and those were the ones that I met. I wasn't choosing just women, it just happened to be women. When you look at Silawat Kluches, Mary Simons, and all the Inuit female leaders, they're the ones who are pushing for change in the world. Yeah.
Hi, it's an honor to have met you personally, having you here. I'm really impressed with the films. I'm going to tell everybody about it. Is it accessible outside of this this event? Is it fairly accessible to get these? If I pass this on to other people.
CBC has done on GEM television. You can watch it, the half version of it. Sad thing is, I'm not dancing in that.
No, I get it. Yeah.
Darn. Who was editing that? But I still, Monica may be able to answer that question. She's right here. Oh, you just look like, you guys look so alike. I steal films, you could ask them.
Okay,
Monica will be right back, but they're the ones who've been distributing it in Canada. There's other distributors in Europe also.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks. I did have a comment or follow-up to a comment of the gentleman that was over there. He was talking about the importance of educating people on what colonization was in the first place, before, not necessarily before, but in conjunction with teaching about decolonization. And I just want to share a tiny story of what I've done as a possible inspiration to others to do the same. Just recently I came across a person who wrote all the family history on my father's side, which is from France, and they were colonizers, and they came to, I'm from Montreal, so they came to Quebec. My great-great-great-great-grandfather from 1650 was one of the people that founded the town of Boucherville, which was along with Pierre Boucher. And she wrote about like 7 or 8 tomes on the family history. There's not a single mention of colonization in the whole of that history, of my family history. And we went in person. I arranged to meet this woman, and she has, unfortunately, cancer now, and she might be in her last days and last breaths, but I caught her just on time to meet her in person, and I didn't have the guts to ask her how she felt about the fact that she was, by the way, also the same last name, so part of my family tree. I didn't have the guts to ask her, why didn't you say a single thing about the fact that we were colonizers, But anyway, nevertheless, it left me with a real kind of chill in my body to realize this is my ancestry. And how am I supposed to feel about this? As a Canadian-born, Montreal-born person of 64 years old, like how am I supposed to process this? So I guess I would love to ask you, how would you like us to process this? And how can I talk to my family and say, okay, let's bring up the topic of the fact that we were colonizers and have the conversation. But my own parents, who are now 89 and 91, they don't want to hear a word about it. They're like, well, we had every right to take over the land, blah, blah. That's just the way it was back then. So I don't know how to have the conversation with people like that. And so anyway, I'm carrying on, but I think you understand what I'm getting at.
Thank you. As your parents or grandparents were saying, times were different. Times are always changing. We weren't talking about, oh, those are colonizers when Martin Frobisher came and was shot in the butt with a bow and arrow. We didn't call him a colonizer in 1576. And when Hans Egede came to Greenland in 1721, we didn't say, oh, these are colonizers. It's now, and now we are talking about it. And you cannot be blamed for something that happened. People had to come to Canada because there was the potato famine. There were need for people to go to other places because in their own place they were starving and they had horrible conditions. The thing was we are very welcoming. How Inuits show authority is by the welcome that they can share. It's a totally different concept. The more authority you can share is by welcoming people, and the Indigenous peoples of Canada were very welcoming. We weren't looking at it, I think, at the time, oh, these are going to be colonizers, and they're going to kill us, and they're going to do all these things, they're going to take over the land. That was not our concept of being welcoming. It was misinterpreted or taken advantage of at the time. What we are doing right now is talking about it. So how can we heal as a society, and how can we move forward and be more respecting? The highest rate of suicide, the highest rate of unemployment, the highest cost of living, the highest lack of housing in my territory is a direct effect of what happened, of us being welcoming. And how can you correct that as a society? How can we correct it to make it a good society again, a place where we all want to live with good conscience and make it better for our grandchildren? And please don't feel bad about what happened. I'm sure you're doing your part in making this place a better place for those of us who have chosen to be here. Yeah. Does that make you feel better?
Can I say something?
Sophie, please.
I just, I hear that a lot at screenings of our film, like what, and it's always directed at my Indigenous director, producer, partner. What do you want us to do? And I feel like that's a giant responsibility. We've come in and we've decimated languages, and we've decimated livelihoods, and we've decimated families, and now we're telling you to tell us how to fix it. I think we, repeat myself, we have to take some responsibility. And I think you're doing the research, you're delving into that, and you are looking at having those conversations with your family. Like, that's amazing. We have to take the responsibility. We have to not say, tell me how to fix it because I screwed it for you,
I'm tired of telling you how to fix it.
Yeah, you've done that already.
You do it yourself.
Yeah, right? It shouldn't be on the Indigenous people to fix it. We screwed it, We have to do it together. And it's so important to have Indigenous voices at the table, but you can't... I think it's really, it's not right for us to put that responsibility back on Indigenous populations.
I I just think it's important that we recognize we are a good society. We are not killing each other because of different thoughts or different values. We are angry for what happened, but we are willing to have a dialogue and to move forward.
Yeah.
I think in Canada we're very fortunate that we can talk about these things as civil and grown-up people, and I think we should be proud of that. But we recognize we are not diminishing or making less what happened, but we are grown up enough and intelligent enough to figure out how to move forward.
I have a couple suggestions for you. As a white settler, someone who loves talking about colonization, especially at my family dinner for Thanksgiving, I would recommend the book by Chelsea Vowell called Indigenous Rights. In that text, she has very short chapters. They're very easily digestible, a lot of humor, which is really wonderful, even though it's about very serious topics and issues. But one of my favorite chapters that talks about how we can move forward is called The Myth of Progress. And that's the idea that as we as a society, as time passes on, we're somehow just done with colonialism, and it's somehow all better now. It certainly is not all better now. And she does a really great job of breaking down a lot of Canadian myths about the national identity that Canadians have, which is built on multiculturalism, which is this idea that, well, if we're multicultural now, then Indigenous peoples no longer have a need or a right to complain. And if they do, it's reverse racism. Right? So these are some really important topics to think about. Another lesson that I took from Chelsea Vowell is her first and second chapters in her book. Again, it's called Indigenous Rights. In these chapters, she talks about the importance of terminology. Now, as someone who leads with my anger as motivation, my anger towards injustices, I will often use the words colonizer very freely. However, if the goal is to get white people or colonizers to listen, we might want to soften language a little bit so that they can open their ears a little bit, or so that we can open our ears a little bit more. So one of the things that Chelsea Vowell suggests is that instead of using the word colonizer, we use the word settler, which is more, it's not more relationship focused than colonizer, but it's a softer way of saying the same thing in a way that can help diminish people's defense mechanisms.
I disagree. I think when you colonize, you take over, you go into a room and you organize everything differently and you put in your language and your culture. When you're a settler, I would think that you would respect the people you are settling in with enough that you are not going to distort or tell them, oh, this is how you're going to hunt, and this is how you're going to live, and this is how you're going to be. I understand the two words very differently. I am a visitor to Canada. I'm a visitor to the Inuit community. I had to learn their language and their culture and then conduct in that fashion. I didn't come in to tell them to speak my language and do my culture and do everything according to me. So to me, I disagree. Why should you soften the word? Because the people are going to cry, oh, I'm a colonizer, I don't want that word. I don't think so. I think we all need to grow up and face reality. Anybody disagree? Come on, bring it on.
I would say I agree with you, but I'm also trying to offer a little bit of guidance in terms of how to have a discussion, but I completely...
Like, we are the ones who lost our language. We are the ones who are missing and murdered. We are the ones who are displaced here. I disagree. Smell the coffee, because this is where we are.
Speaking of the missing and murdered, I was wondering if I could ask a question that connects themes that arose in both of the movies, but also to Isabel's criminological area of expertise, which is, of course, violence against women. I was wondering if you could speak to the different ways that the ongoing colonized experience and the history of colonization leads to a higher likelihood of Indigenous women suffering from gendered violence.
How does the history lead to?
Yeah, what is the relationship? Because like the relationship of colonialism, it can affect people and cultures and communities in complex ways. So what are some of the ways that history has led to this kind of pandemic of gendered violence?
Yeah, that's an enormous question, so I'll just offer a few thoughts. So, as I'm hoping that many of us know, a lot of Indigenous nations were and continue to be matriarchal. So the women are the leaders in the communities, and when colonizers, not settlers, came in and took everything over, what they brought with them and what they forced with them was patriarchy and misogyny, and through assimilation and a gradual, violent forcing of Eurocentric beliefs onto Indigenous peoples, it very much changed the matriarchal cultures, and it affected things like women weren't able to pass on their family name, which was part of different matriarchal cultures, and so just the idea of whose name we take, whose family name do we pass on, has huge ramifications when we think about the value that is placed on a family name. Are we valuing women? Are we valuing their name, or are we valuing men and men's names? So even things like through the Indian Act before it was amended, there were these huge problems of this devaluing of women. And today we see it, of course, in the media and the stereotypes, and we don't see a lot of films like this in dominating media. We're seeing other kinds of films where Indigenous women continue to be nameless, faceless, and just completely devalued. And I think one of the things that really brought to light in the first film was the faces and the stories and the complexities and the personhood of who each individual woman was and is in one case, and continues to be through the relationships that she had with her family and her friends and her community. I think the film did a really great job of decolonizing murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, and how we can think about this crisis.
Do you have thoughts? After you. Okay. I have a few thoughts too. I think, how women are portrayed in the media, Indigenous women are portrayed in the media. One of the reasons we chose to take the track we did is because when you hear about missing women or murdered women who are white, you hear she had 3 children, her mother misses her, she's going to leave such a gap in the community. And when you hear of an Indigenous woman who's been murdered, you hear she was found face down in a field, she's a meth addict. One line, and you never hear about her again. So I think that devaluing of women, I think the history and colonization feeds into these tribal women have been told they're less than. So it really matters the stories that you hear. It really matters the stories that you tell your children. If you're told you're less than all the time, how do you value yourself? That's really, really hard. And so I think being told for 200 years, how long's Canada been colonized? I'm going from Australia here, sorry. We've been colonized for 200 years. You hear that message enough, you learn it. It's muscle memory. We talked about that a little bit earlier. So I think in that regard, and I want to say boarding schools, residential schools, Australian missions, that history has deeply affected, in my opinion, why Indigenous women are targeted more or affected more. I think, you know, there's huge generations of lack of knowledge. People don't know how to be parents. I mean, you talked about that with your brother in your film, and it just, I mean, it got me right here, you know. That connection to family was just erased. That section, you know, you think about a building block wall of Lego and you take out one, you know, you pull the bottom line out and everything falls over. So I think not recognizing that history feeds into the MMIW epidemic, like we are not being honest with ourselves. I could keep going, but I really think.
I think that it was the whole destruction of that society that was functioning. In the Inuit culture, you had the igloo, for instance. It's winter 10 months of the year. Before climate change, the woman had to keep the hullut going so that everything was not frozen as long as they had fat. So the woman carried the babies, the woman looked after the babies, the man went out hunting, so it was a division of survival for future generations. But then when the colonizers came in, that was totally destroyed. When the missionaries came in and said, the man is the whatever. I'm not going to repeat it. And then the Canadian government came in and said, man, last name, man, all this, man, all this. So the women then became, they couldn't even vote until the 50s or 60s in my territory. So there's a lot of work of bringing up the women, but going back, there's a lot of women who have taken the power. We have become very strong leaders because somebody has to get up and do the fight.
Any more questions from the audience? We have a hand over here and then one at the back.
So one of the things I noticed was that it was Greenpeace that was against the anti-seal, So I was kind of wondering, what would you say to, I guess, like the colonizers that are also the environmentalists? Like, how should they approach environmentalism in a way that does not trample on Indigenous rights?
Greenpeace, one thing, Greenpeace does a lot of good things. But what they did with the sealing, anti-sealing campaign was they focused on the seal pups. And seal pups, the white coats have to cry all the time in order for their eyes not to freeze. It's so cold. So they banked on that, and they are still using the white seal coat for making money, even though it was banned in 1982, that you cannot hunt white coats anymore. But because Greenpeace was making so much money, they kept, and they're still using the white seal pups for their money-making business. Since the late 1960s, 70s, 80s going on, Greenpeace has made a lot of money on sealers, the south of Canada sealers in the Maritimes, and then Inuit also suffered the consequences of the seal bans. And I think because Greenpeace has made so much money on sealing that it eats Inuk and each sealer should be compensated $1 million, saying, I'm sorry I did this is not good enough. When you harm something, like injustice, if you harm somebody, you're going to go to jail, you're going to compensate them, right? I think the same should be applied to Greenpeace. the whole world was just bombarded with very angry anti-sealers who were started in Canada. We all just bought into it. Not me, but everybody just bought into don't kill the seals without understanding what the hell was going on. They were very loud, and we couldn't fight like that. Our elders will not allow us to stand up and be stupid like a 2-year-old giving a tantrum. Our elders won't allow us to do that. We have to come into the room and speak properly and say our reason. But nobody listens to that. People now just listen to very loud, angry bombing and killing. And thank you for raising that, because we will not take on the attitude of Greenpeace in order to say our piece. It has harmed us so much for the past 50 years. I think Canada and the world should be educated enough to know that when Greenpeace started its campaign, there was 1.5 million seals in Canada, and now we have at least 7 to 15, 14 million harp seals. It depends whose number you're taking. It has multiplied so great that the seal population is taking 7 to 10 million ton of fish every year, like much more than the oceans can support. In our ancient traditional knowledge, we say an overpopulation of something is not good. It's not good for the environment. An overpopulation of the seal population is not good for the environment. Yeah. I'm very passionate about the seal because it has harmed my people so much. You guys want to stay till midnight?
I think I did promise one more question, so I think we do just have time to squeeze one more in, so long as it is quite concise.
Yes, actually, it's a comment with 3 parts. Aaju, I want to fast. First, thank you for disagree or to tease out what the difference between settlers and colonizers. I appreciate that very much. Second part, I appreciate the other 2 panelists starting the conversation about how, as colonizers, white settlers, you can do the work in the community. Each community had their own work to do. So I appreciate Sophie saying white settlers shouldn't put this on the indigenous people to do the work, to tell you what to do. Thank you for that. As a visitor, settler, immigrant myself, I feel for you, Aaju, when you probably felt the need to say, don't feel guilty about what your ancestors did and so on. I felt for you because that's what marginalized people have been conditioned to cater to the colonizers' need for us to be the comforters. And I feel for you, and that actually made me cringe. And when you are able to distinguish between settler and the colonizer, I root for you. And I think I saw your fighting spirit. And I appreciate this is a process for all of us, including for you, for me, for everybody else. I just encourage the white majority continue do your work in your own community, and knowing some words you see have direct impact, emotional impact on us as marginalized people. Thank you.
What's your name?
I'm Hua Mei Han.
And Kwame Han, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me respond. When we were in law school, we started 2001, and we had indigenous professors from Victoria, because we were affiliated with the University of Victoria. They would come up to give us courses and tell us about how the missionaries and how residential schools took all the children and how so much harm was done to their people. And they would say it without anger and without frustration as I would have expected. But you know what I realized? They did not have to carry this shit because it was not their shit. It was something that was done to them. So they don't have to carry all the anger and all the grief with them because they can give it back and say, here, you take this and you work toward healing and toward making a better Canada for all of us. And this is what I'm saying to the lady. I don't want her to carry this because it was not her doing. It was none of our doing. What we can do today is, okay, we look at it as angry as we may be. The only way we can move forward is working together. And blame is, it has no space here. There's no space for blame. We can only take ownership of the things that we have done wrong. I have done so many things wrong. Oh dang. I don't have a free ticket anywhere. We have to take ownership, but we cannot blame. Judge Sissons in 1950s, he was the judge who came to the Canadian Arctic and would hold court. And he wrote in his book, and you can look it up, it's written right there. The Inuit are the only people he has ever met who doesn't have the blame. They do not blame. So I come from a long line of people who hold this, that the blame has no place. It doesn't move us any forward, so. Good night.
Thank you so much to Aaju Peter, Sophie Barksdale, and to Isabel Scheuneman Scott.